Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2025 Annual Stockholders Meeting of Lopez Holdings Corporation. In compliance with Securities and Exchange Commission Memorandum Circular Number 6, Series of 2020, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. Let us all rise for a prayer and the Philippine National Anthem.
Lord Almighty, you are the well of goodness and grace. We praise you for holding our hand through every success and ask that you protect us through every storm. Bless us, Lord, with the means to share stories of human good to our kapamilya and to the rest of the world. We lift to you all our goals and dreams, knowing that you have the best plan for our company. We will keep the faith that as long as we commit to your will, our aspirations will come to fruition, and that your timing will never be too early nor too late. Amen. Lord,
We would like to advise the stockholders that the following directors are present: Mr. Federico R. Lopez, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer; Mr. Martin L. Lopez, Vice Chairman; Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, President; Ms. Roberta L. Feliciano, Director; Ms. Consuelo D. Garcia, Independent Director; Mr. Roberto B. Pandillo, Independent Director; and Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia, Independent Director. Mr. Cesar E. Virata, Board Advisor; the senior management, as well as representatives from external auditors, Sisip Gores, Pelayo and Company, are also present at this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the Board of Lopez Holdings Corporation, Mr. Federico R. Lopez.
Good morning. The annual stockholders meeting will please come to order. We are holding this meeting virtually, and we thank everyone who registered, sent proxies, or is now present at this meeting. Mr. Secretary, were notices of the annual meeting provided to the stockholders?
Mr. Chairman, I have caused notices of this annual meeting to be published in accordance with applicable regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission. In compliance with the SEC's requirements, the notice and agenda of the meeting were published in the business section of the Philippine Star and the Manila Bulletin, both being newspapers of general circulation, last May 9 and 10, 2025, in both printed form and online. The meeting materials, including the notice and agenda, the explanation of the agenda items, the definitive information statement, the registration and validation procedures for the virtual annual stockholders meeting, and the audited financial statements, together with the quarterly reports, were also posted in the Philippine Stock Exchange's EDGE disclosure system and on the company's website.
Mr. Secretary, is there a quorum?
Mr. Chairman, according to our records, out of the 4,519,406,911 common shares of the corporation issued and outstanding, there are present in this meeting, virtually or by proxy, 3,439,372,132 shares of the common stock, representing at least 76.102% of the issued and outstanding voting stock. Mr. Chairman, there exists a quorum for this meeting.
Mr. Secretary, please discuss the procedures and other ground rules for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, under the company's articles of incorporation, all common shares have full voting rights. All common stockholders as of April 30, 2025 are entitled to register and vote the number of shares in their name as of the record date. The notice and agenda, as published, include the explanation of the agenda items. As stated in the registration and validation procedures for the virtual annual stockholders meeting furnished to the stockholders, a validation of the stockholders' votes was conducted from June 11 to June 17, 2025. Stockholders intending to participate in the virtual annual stockholders meeting were requested to register through a designated link. Validated stockholders and proxies were sent a confirmation through email and the links to this virtual annual stockholders meeting. They were requested to cast their votes on or before June 9, 2025 at 6 p.m. through a secure online voting platform. This online voting platform contains the items for approval as indicated in the agenda set out in the notice. The proposed resolution for each of these will be shown later on the screen. The manner of voting shall be non-cumulative except as to the election of directors. Each stockholder shall have one vote for each share entitled to vote and registered in his name. Stockholders had the option to either vote in favor of or against a matter for approval or to abstain. The vote of the stockholders representing at least a majority of the shares present or represented at the meeting will be sufficient to approve any of the matters for approval. In the election of directors, cumulative voting shall be allowed, and the top 7 nominees with the most votes will be elected as directors. Votes received through electronic voting or voting in absentia and votes cast through proxies were tabulated by the Office of the Corporate Secretary and RCBC Stock Transfer Processing and validated by CCIP Goris Velay and Company. The results of voting with full details of the affirmative and negative votes, as well as abstentions, will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Questions and comments were allotted to be submitted during registration and until June 9, 2025. These participation and voting procedures are also contained in the information statement, accessible to all stockholders through the company's website and the annual stockholders meeting portal, as well as the EDGE disclosure system of the Philippine Stock Exchange. In the event of technical difficulties, disorder, or other significant problems that may disrupt this meeting, the chairman may adjourn, recess, or expedite the meeting, or take other actions that the chairman may determine. In such an instance, the participants are asked to stay connected to the meeting for at least 30 minutes. If the meeting cannot be resumed, it will be considered adjourned and will be rescheduled to a later date, and will resume from where it was prior to the problem. This meeting is being recorded, and except for the designated speakers and presenters, the microphones of the other attendees will be muted.
And the next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the previous stockholders meeting. May I request the corporate secretary to read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting results in this item.
Mr. Chairman, an electronic copy of the draft minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held last June 21, 2024 has been made available at the company's website. Management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation approve, as they hereby approve, the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on June 21, 2024. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it a record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,436,825,432 shares, or 99.926% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting. Zero shares voted against and 0 shares abstained.
This is noted, and the resolution stands approved. I'll now give my message. So back in 2013, we witnessed firsthand as a company the destruction and devastation wrought by Typhoon Haiyan, the most powerful typhoon ever to make landfall. The storm made a direct hit on the island of Leyte, severely damaging our largest geothermal power plants and disabling them for a few months. Now, more than that, the death toll exceeded 6,300, but was likely higher as hundreds more were reported missing. Now, for many months after, our more than 700 plus employees simultaneously focused on rebuilding our plants to get them back to service, as well as all the rescue and relief efforts for affected communities and residents around the province. That single typhoon upended the lives of thousands of people on the island for years. And despite help and efforts to rebuild, many never recovered what they lost. Now, it became crystal clear to us, even back then, that we had just experienced the fury of being at ground zero of a climate change planet. Typhoon Haiyan was our rude wake-up call that it can no longer be business as usual. And as a result, in 2016, we began building our energy portfolio around the theme of decarbonizing our electricity supplies. And by 2020, we had recast the FPH Group's mission to forge collaborative pathways for a decarbonized and regenerative future. Now, since that time, all parts of the world have witnessed their own versions of the global weirding of our weather, a term that captures the intensifying, unpredictable, and often contradictory pattern of climate extremes. 2024 was another horrendous year for the planet, with the average annual temperature hitting 1.55 degrees Celsius, above that of pre-industrial times. This makes the year the hottest it's ever been in the last 125,000 years or so, surpassing 2023, which had that record. The year also became a global demonstration of what happens when you have those higher temperatures that cause both extremely wet and insanely dry conditions. The planet will survive, but can humans and biodiversity as we know it adapt fast enough to what's coming? And can we do what's needed to mitigate emissions and even reverse these forces set in motion by our carbon-intensive economies? In 2024, deadly wildfires continued to rage across several countries in South America and in California, causing billions in damage. Scorching heat waves gripped India, Mexico, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, with the Philippines recording a 55 degrees Celsius heat index last May 26 in eastern Samar. Southern Africa suffered its worst drought in a century, threatening food security for millions of people and affecting livestock. Ocean temperatures hit record highs, fueling stronger typhoons and floods such as those experienced in eastern Spain, Thailand, and Malaysia. Metro Manila's flooding from Super Typhoon Karina broke records that were set by Ondoy in 2009, dumping 471 millimeters of rain in just 24 hours. Across the Philippines, we experienced 6 destructive typhoons between just October and November, resulting in 160 deaths, widespread destruction of homes, significant damage to public infrastructure, and extensive damage to crops, livestock, and fisheries. In each of these events, we see families losing almost everything they have, and being uninsured keep having to restart their lives over and over again in some vicious and cruel cycle of nature. The rising global temperature is also having a profound and accelerating impact on the cryosphere, which includes all of Earth's frozen water. The Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets are losing ice at an alarming rate, according to NASA and the IPCC. The Greenland ice sheet alone has lost around 4,890 billion metric tons of ice between 1992 to 2020. And just to give you a sense of what the scale of that is that if all of that ice melted into water, it would be enough to cover the entire US by about half a meter. Now, just I thought I'd also just share this, but just 2 days ago, there was an article that came out in the Scientific American, also which talks about how we may be underestimating the speed and the fragility of the ice sheet over Greenland. And I guess part of this is that Greenland, when you think about it, holds about more than 7 meters worth of sea level rise in it, and if that goes, and a lot of this, I think what that study was pointing out, and these are groups that are basically in Greenland drilling the ice cores, to find out the history, and they're finding quite alarmingly that Greenland was ice free as as recent as maybe 7,000 years ago. So that's how fragile that is. Now, anyway, glaciers also, which hold 75% of Earth's fresh water, are disappearing at twice the rate that they did in the year 2000, and its meltwater has contributed to 21% of global sea level rise. Now, what 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, half of the world's glaciers could disappear. And by the end of the century, so melting glaciers and ice sheets have already raised sea levels by around 21 to 24 cm just since 1880. So again, as I was saying, if all of Greenland's ice melts, sea levels will rise by 7 meters. And if Antarctica follows, the increase will be a staggering 58 meters. And this table here keeps me up at night. It looks very boring, but it when you look at what the data is trying to tell you, you'll have sleepless nights. Because all of this could actually, when you think about Greenland at 7, even just at 7 meters, and worse, Antarctica, a lot of that could drown cities worldwide. Now, permafrost, the frozen ground in Arctic regions, is thawing and releasing massive amounts of methane that's up to 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide, depending on the time frame. The Arctic tundra has now transitioned from a carbon sink to a carbon source due to increasing wildfire activities and warmer temperatures. Now, this could trigger a climate time bomb, accelerating warming in an irreversible way. The rising temperature is also causing the destruction of our ecosystems, threatening biodiversity and disrupting the marine food chain. We experienced the world's 4th global coral bleaching event in April 2024. That was the worst on record, as it affected 77% of the world's coral reef areas. So at 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming, between 70 to 90% of coral reefs will suffer. At 2 degrees Celsius, more than 99% of coral reefs could be lost. And up to 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, many within decades. This will lead to the further disruption of ecosystems and food chains, impacting agriculture and food security. Now, it's becoming more and more apparent each year that we are crossing several irreversible tipping points for the planet. The rapidly changing climate is not only bringing massive destruction in its wake, but also dispossessing millions of families of everything they have on a brutal and repeated basis. The effects are cascading, and further inaction will make it increasingly more difficult for life on this planet to adapt fast enough. Now, recall how the world came together 10 years ago in Paris and agreed to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with an aspirational target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. More recently, the UN IPCC has underscored the urgency to target 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid catastrophic climate impacts. Of course, COP29 last November brought some good news and culminated in several pivotal agreements aimed at intensifying global climate action. Among them, the tripling of climate financing pledges from developed nations to $300 billion annually, and the Loss and Damage Fund that is designed to provide financing to climate vulnerable nations. However, these wins for climate advocates were somewhat dampened by subsequent events that threaten progress on climate actions. Firstly, despite the dramatic 90% decline in renewable energy prices over the last 15 years, 2024 was also a record year for the global economy, producing its energy from oil and coal, with hydrocarbons comprising 80% of the global primary energy mix. That's down only slightly from 85% in the 1990s. Secondly, the US, under its new administration, withdrew from the Paris Agreement, cutting climate funding and potentially stalling progress worldwide. This exit from the landmark agreement may be seen as an excuse by less committed companies to ease off their own efforts to curb their carbon emissions. Some oil and gas companies have announced plans to increase their output, reversing previous commitments to reduce fossil fuel production. Still, there are others that are advocating for stable long-term climate policies to effectively address greenhouse gas emissions. Other corporate leaders face the dilemma of aligning with all of these shifts in policy or adhering and sticking to their sustainability commitments. 6 major US banks have abandoned the Net Zero Banking Alliance, reducing decarbonization financing for many climate vulnerable nations in Southeast Asia, seeking investments and loans to build climate resilient infrastructure. The US Securities and Exchange Commission has also introduced regulations that reduce funding for clean energy projects and has made it easier for companies to contest shareholder resolutions related to environmental, social, and governance, or ESG issues. The global landscape of net zero commitments has also experienced significant shifts, reflecting both progress and emerging challenges. A substantial portion of the world's largest corporations have pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Notably, 65% of the annual revenue of the world's largest 2,000 companies is now covered by a net zero target. However, a recent analysis reveals that only 16% of these companies are currently on track to meet their net zero goals, with nearly half witnessing an increase in emissions. The 2023 GST, or Global Stocktake, which is a core component of the Paris Agreement that assesses each country's progress on climate action and encourages them to augment their climate goals, highlighted that the world is not on track on limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In response, countries are required to submit updated NDCs by February 2025, delineating their enhanced commitments to emissions reductions and climate resilience. However, as of the February 10 deadline this year, only 13 out of 195 nations have complied, potentially impeding global mitigation efforts. For the Philippines, despite the Department of Energy's renewable energy roadmap and the moratorium on new coal plants in October 2020, we continue to be heavily reliant on coal for our energy needs, accounting for 62% of the electricity generated in 2024. However, even as we speak, interests are at work to expand coal plants, which will heighten our electricity grid's reliance on even more coal and increase the carbon emissions per kilowatt hour of our electricity grid. The justification being that coal today is cheaper. And if the grid moves in the wrong direction, it will nullify the decarbonizing effects of electrification. Your electric vehicles, for example, being effectively powered by even more coal, ironically. Now, in the last few years, I've spoken about what many believe are the three necessary phases to solve the climate crisis. In phase one, it's that of reducing greenhouse gases from the current global emissions of 50 gigatons of GHGs per year, and then having our emissions peak by 2025. Then there's phase two, eliminating all emissions of GHGs and get to net zero by 2050. And then you can't stop there, but you have to get to phase three now, which is net negative emissions, meaning reducing or literally sucking out the concentrations of greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere. Because they stay, as we know, they stay there for thousands and thousands of years if you don't. And it will continue to affect the planet's environment. Now, unfortunately, much of the world's actions are still primarily just focused on this phase one reduction. And the emissions peaking by 2025 is certainly not about to happen. Now, sometimes we visualize technology breakthroughs and the possibility that the AI revolution can help solve the world's most intractable and wicked problems. Now, this is exciting as we acquire new and more powerful tools that enable us to go beyond historical human limits. But this is also a double-edged sword, as fueling this AI revolution will now put even more strain on our power grids and the demands imposed by the energy transition to net zero. Now, prior to considerations for AI, the expectation was that we would need 5 times more electricity and 10 times more clean electricity by 2050 to shepherd us through the 3 phases of decarbonization. Now, just over the last 2, 3, 4 years, there's been a growing recognition of now the power requirements needed for the AI revolution, currently projected to require an additional 45,000 megawatts between now and 2030. Now, this is adding the equivalent of what a major economy like France or Germany uses today. Beyond 2030, the increases are projected to make exponential leaps. Global data center developers fueling the AI revolution expect to be primarily constrained not so much by demand, but by their access to reliable power. The International Energy Agency also noted that the extreme heat of 2024 also increased emissions and energy use considerably due to higher needs for air conditioning and cooling. Now, this underscores yet another deadly feedback loop that will make solving the climate crisis even more challenging. The prospect of cheaper, more affordable 24/7 renewable power, batteries, EVs, have been coming down fast over the last decades, thanks in large part to China, economies of scale, and globalization. Now, all these may encounter headwinds as the world deglobalizes and bifurcates further. We will need to watch this space closely, but in their drive for cheaper and cleaner power, many data center developers are now looking toward nuclear power. Now, hopefully, the smaller, safer technologies like the SMRs, the small and the micro modular reactors, develop fast enough. But as of now, they're still about 5 to 10 years away from commerciality. Now, admittedly, when we see the compressed time frame of just 25 years that we have left to achieve all three phases of decarbonizing our economies, our lives, and the planet before it all tips into irreversibility, it can all feel extremely daunting. Now, given all these headwinds and challenges, many of you may ask whether our group's mission, value, and mission, vision, and strategic directions are still realistic. Our answer to this is a resounding yes, and even more so. We have always maintained that the forces of climate change are not linear. We have used the phrase gradually then suddenly. This is a Hemingway phrase from his book, The Sun Also Rises. But we've used this phrase gradually then suddenly to describe how it will progress. And today's almost exponential acceleration of climate shocks can no longer be ignored. Likewise, the socio-political and the economic forces that will transform the way we live and work on this planet are not and will also never be linear. But the direction and scale of the natural forces unleashed is undeniable, and so must be the scale and intensity of our actions. I'll say it again, but this is the greatest transition in the history of mankind. But with these great challenges come great opportunities. And we are thus continuing to shape our platform of businesses to help shepherd our country's energy use towards staying relevant as well as profitable in this rapidly decarbonizing world. Thank you for your continued trust and support as we stay the course. So I'll now turn you over to our President, Dory Tirona, to give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, fellow shareholders. For the year 2024, Lopez Holdings reported 6.343 billion pesos in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent. This is 123% higher than the 2.850 billion in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent in 2023. The parent company booked a lower equity share in the net losses of ABS-CBN, and even as First Philippine Holdings Corporation, or FPH, reported a lower consolidated net income. Lopez Holdings' consolidated total assets increased by 54.602 billion pesos, or 12%, to 527.649 billion as of year-end 2024, from 473.047 billion pesos as of the previous year and 2023. It was mainly due to higher year-end balances of non-current assets attributed to the PPE and goodwill and intangible assets resulting from the acquisition of the Casecnan Hydroelectric Power Plant in 2024 and the recovered goodwill associated with the acquisition of Energy Development Corporation. Consolidated total liabilities increased by 28.709 billion pesos, or 13%, to 256.268 billion from 227.559 billion pesos as at year-end 2024 and 2023 respectively. The increase was primarily due to the additional loans availed of for the acquisition of the Casecnan Power Plant. The parent company, Lopez Holdings, has had no more direct obligations since 2017. Debt-to-equity ratio slightly increased at 0.59 times in 2024 from 0.54 times in 2023, while the book value per share increased to 21.17 pesos a share at the end of 2024 from a book value of 19.68 pesos a share in 2023. Total equity attributable to parent stood at 92.171 billion pesos as of December 31, 2024, or 11% higher than the 83.263 billion pesos as of December 31, 2023. This is on account of the net income attributable to parent of 6.343 billion pesos for the year and share in the equity movements of investments in FPH and ABS-CBN through the Lopez PDRs. Non-controlling interest pertains to the share of minority interests on the total equity of LHC and FPH as consolidated. Moving on to our investee companies, FPH reported a 5% decrease in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent to 14.316 billion pesos from 15.066 billion pesos in 2023. Recurring net income attributable to FPH was at a steady 13.8 billion pesos. Its year-on-year consolidated revenues were slightly higher by 1% at 167.11 billion pesos from 164.952 billion pesos. 82% of FPH 2024 revenues came from its power generation units under First Gen Corporation or First Gen, compared to 84% in 2023. In February 2024, FGen's wholly owned subsidiary, Fresh River Lakes Corporation, took over the ownership and operation of the 165-megawatt Caseknan Hydroelectric Power Plant, a runoff river type of facility located in Pantabangan, Nueva Ecija. The plant helped increase the share of hydro in First Gen's revenues to 2.9% in 2024 from 1.6% in 2023. While this positive performance was partially offset by the lower revenues of other hydro assets due to the generally low water reservoir levels, as well as the lower average selling price at the wholesale electricity spot market, it shows the potential of this plant to move First Gen's renewable energy agenda. While classified as a runoff river hydro facility, Caseknan Power Plant holds a unique attribute that sets it apart from other runoff river projects. That is its impounding capability. This distinct trait allows the plant to optimize its dispatch and operation, including its use as a picking plant depending on the market conditions and demand. For the FPH property development units, Rockwell Land Corporation recorded higher revenues from an increase in sales bookings and the construction completion of its residential development projects. Its lease income also improved with higher average rental and occupancy rates of its retail and office leasing segments, with some contribution from the additional leasable area of Proscenium Retail Road. First Philippine Industrial Park, another company under FPH, also saw better recurring industrial land lease and ready-built factory rentals due to additional contracts with new locators and contract renewals with existing locators, as well as higher water revenues from increased volume and tariff rates. For ABS-CBN Corporation, it reported a 2024 net loss of 6.092 billion pesos, which is 53% lower than the net loss of 12.835 billion pesos in 2023. Year-on-year revenues decreased by 6% to 17.329 billion pesos versus 18.511 billion pesos the previous year. In 2024, we saw ABS-CBN's subsidiary, Sky Cable Corporation, enter into a commercial and technical arrangement with leading Philippine fiber broadband provider, Converge Information and Communications Technology Solutions, Inc. The agreement has enabled Sky to upgrade its network and improve services to its subscribers. In addition to the network upgrade, the agreement with Converge supports Sky's transformation program toward increased operational efficiency, greater financial discipline, and organizational improvements. And just last February 2025, ABS-CBN agreed to sell a portion of the land housing its headquarters to Ayala Land, Inc. The sale, covering 30,000 square meters out of the more than 44,000 square meters of ABS-CBN's property in Quezon City, is subject to certain conditions precedent, including the Philippine Competition Commission clearance. When this sale pushes through, ABS-CBN will be consolidating its operations in the remaining 1.4 hectares of the property. This will also allow the company to partially prepay some of its outstanding bank loans. It is important to mention that despite the almost insurmountable challenges it has continuously faced since 2020, ABS-CBN has continuously serviced its debt and stayed current on all bank obligations. What's more, in April 2025, it was named the gold winner in the Media and Entertainment category of Finance Asia's Best Companies Poll 2025. Now on its 25th year, Finance Asia's annual poll is a widely respected benchmark that recognizes top-performing companies across Asia. Finance Asia's Best Companies poll evaluates the corporate behavior and performance of Asian companies over the past 12 months. Rankings are based on nominations from influential investors and financial analysts, reflecting the market confidence in the winning companies. ABS continues to offer world-class content and highlight the strength of the Filipino in its programs and event offerings. In 2024, the movie Hello, Love Again, a collaboration between Star Cinema and GMA Pictures, became the highest-grossing Filipino film with over 1.4 billion pesos in box office receipts, including $7 million from its international release. This was a sequel to the 2019 Star Cinema film Hello, Love, Goodbye, which was the highest-grossing Filipino movie at 691 million, until the 2023 release of Rewind, a co-production of Star Cinema, Agosto Dos Media, and APT Entertainment, which grossed at 924 million pesos. FPJ's Batang Quiapo, a primetime series starring actor Coco Martin, remained unbeatable in its time slot after TV Patrol. It started airing in February 2023 and grew stronger in 2024, with audiences drawn to its high-stakes action sequences anchored on the stories of universal characters navigating family life, love, and adversity. As for the events, the all-girl P-pop group BINI held successful concerts in 2024, including a 3-day sold-out concert at the Smart Araneta Coliseum. Even the rescheduling of one of those concerts to another day due to a typhoon did not stop the Blooms, as BINI fans call themselves, from supporting their idols. For this year, the group managed by ABS-CBN's talent management arm, Star Magic, embarked on the BINIverse World Tour 2025, which should take them to 14 foreign locations. The tour actually kicked off at the Philippine Arena in February 2025, and from May to June, the concert travels to Dubai, then London, and then 12 US cities, including Houston and Dallas in Texas, and Los Angeles and San Francisco in California. Beanie's current success did not come overnight. The girls started under Star Hunt Academy, a talent development program of ABS-CBN, which nurtures and hones aspiring Filipino artists in music and acting. After passing auditions, aspirants undergo a rigorous training, and for Beanie, this happened during the early days of the pandemic lockdown. Talent development seems to be both a science and an art, which ABS-CBN wants to master as it aims to introduce more P-pop groups and other Filipino talents to the world. Let me now report on the unaudited financial results for the first quarter of 2025. Lopez Holdings' net income attributable to equity holders of the parent rose by 57% to 2.744 billion pesos from 1.752 billion pesos year on year. This was primarily resulting from the uptick in the earnings contribution of all major business segments of the FPH Group, and the absence of equity share in net losses of ABS-CBN in the current period, which amounted to 534 million pesos in Q1 2024. FPH reported consolidated net income of 8.495 billion pesos for the 3 months ended March 31, 2025, or 12% higher than the 7.552 billion pesos net income in Q1 2024. While net income attributable to parent grew by 20% to 4.961 billion from 4.136 billion year on year. It reported a 6% increase in revenues to 41.327 billion from 39.125 billion pesos. Sale of electricity accounted for 82 and 85% of revenues in Q1 2025 and Q1 2024 respectively. On the other hand, ABS-CBN reported an unaudited net loss of 500 million pesos, which is a 50% improvement over the net loss of 994 million pesos in Q1 2024. It reported unaudited revenues of 4.231 billion pesos, 4% higher than the 4.080 billion pesos in the same quarter last year. As of March 31, 2025, unaudited consolidated total assets stood at 530.430 billion pesos from 527.649 billion pesos as of December 31, 2024. Significant changes in the balances reflect those of FPH accounts. Current liabilities declined by 10% to 84.795 billion pesos as of March 31, 2025, on account of first-gen settlement of payables to gas sellers and contractors accounted for under trade payables and other current liabilities. Total equity attributable to parent increased by 5% to 94.436 billion pesos as of March 31, 2025, from 92.171 billion pesos as of December 31, 2024. This is on account of the net income attributable to parent of 2.744 billion pesos for the period and a share in the equity movements of investments in FPH. Non-controlling interest pertains to share of minority interest on the total equity of LHC and FPH as consolidated. As we move forward in 2025 and beyond, Lopez Holdings will continue to monitor and evaluate our risks and those of our investees. and execute plans to mitigate its negative impact. However, we cannot deny the fact that there are even more uncertainties emerging in the world today. And because power generation forms the bulk of your company's portfolio through FPH and its subsidiaries, we are very much aware of the need to address the climate crisis in meaningful ways. But we cannot do it alone. We continue to collaborate with groups and businesses and various stakeholders who share our commitment to clean energy, decarbonization, and energy security for our country. We thank you, fellow shareholders, for your continued support and confidence in your management team.
Thank you very much, President Dory. Copies of the management report, which includes the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31, 2024, were duly published and made available to the stockholders prior to this meeting. The floor is now open for questions on the reports. Mr. Secretary, can you discuss this further?
Mr. Chairman, the management report and the financial statements include all pertinent actions undertaken during the year, as well as the activities and performance of the subsidiaries and affiliates, including the declaration of dividends by the company. The Board of Directors approved the issuance of the financial statements last April 7, 2025. In connection with this meeting, the corporation had requested its valued shareholders to submit their questions through a designated online link on or before June 9, 2025. However, we did not receive any questions from our stockholders. But for questions submitted after the deadline, or for additional questions from stockholders, this may be directed to the Office of the Corporate Secretary by email at corporatesecretary@lopezholdings.ph.
May I now request the Corporate Secretary to read the proposed resolution with respect to the foregoing matters and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation, the corporation, confirm, approve, and ratify, as they hereby do confirm, approve, and ratify the Board of Directors' approval of the audited financial statements of the corporation for the period ended December 31, 2024. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,436,825,432 shares, or 99.926% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the approval of the audited financial statements. 0 shares voted and 0 shares abstained.
It is so noted, and the resolution stands approved. Next item in our agenda is the ratification of the acts of the Board of Directors and the management of the corporation. Mr. Secretary, please read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, the actions affecting the business operations, financial performance, and decisions of the corporation are also covered in our information statement, management report, chairman's message, and president's report, and in our discussions in this meeting. Management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that all resolutions and acts of the Board of Directors, as well as the acts and contracts entered into by management of Lopez Holdings Corporation during the calendar year ended December 31, 2024, and up to the date of this annual stockholders meeting, the chairman's message and the president's report be as they are hereby confirmed, ratified, and approved by the stockholders. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,436,825,432 shares, or 99.926% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the confirmation, ratification, and approval of the acts of the Board of Directors and of the management during the calendar year ended December 31, 2024, and up to the date of this meeting, as well as the chairman's message and president's report rendered today. 0 shares voted against and 0 shares abstained.
This is noted, and the resolution stands approved. The next item in the agenda is the election of directors of the corporation for the ensuing year. There are 7 seats in the board to be filled.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with the bylaws and manual of corporate governance, the following have been qualified and nominated as directors of the corporation for the ensuing year: Mr. Federico R. Lopez, Mr. Martin L. Lopez, Mr. Rafael L. Lopez, Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, Mr. Roberto L. Padillo, Ms. Consuelo D. Garcia, and Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia. Ms. Garcia, Mr. Padillo, and Mr. Garcia are being nominated as independent directors. The directors' qualifications and professional experience are all discussed in the information statement. For the election of directors, stockholders had the option to vote their shares for each of the nominees, not vote for any nominee, or vote for one or some nominees only, in such number of shares as the stockholders prefer, provided that the total number of votes cast does not exceed the number of shares owned by them, multiplied by the number of directors to be elected, which in this case is 7. Mr. Chairman, the results of the voting based on the votes cast and received, as tabulated by the Office of the Corporate Secretary and RCBC Trust Stock Processing, and validated by CCP Guares Velay and Company are as follows: Mr. Federico R. Lopez, 3,901,590,890 votes. Mr. Martin L. Lopez, 3,900,690,887 votes. Mr. Rafael L. Lopez, 3,900,690,886 votes. Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, 3,900,690,886 votes. Ms. Consuelo D. Garcia, 3,900,690,886 votes. Mr. Roberto L. Padillo, 3,900,690,886 votes. And Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia, 93,487,457 votes. The following 7 nominees received the highest number of votes: Mr. Federico R. Lopez, Mr. Martin L. Lopez, Mr. Rafael L. Lopez, Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, Ms. Consuelo D. Garcia, Mr. Roberto L. Padillo, and Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia. The results of the election and tally of votes will be made part of the records. I certify that the Board of Directors so nominated have received the requisite votes for election without prejudice to a final tabulation to be made part of the records.
This is noted, and I also hereby declare the said 7 nominees who received the highest number of votes to be duly elected members of the Board of Directors of Lopez Holdings Corporation to serve as such for the ensuing year until their successors shall be duly elected and qualified. The last item in our agenda is the appointment of external auditors for our corporation. May I request the Corporate Secretary to read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting result.
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation approve the appointment of CCP Guares Velay and Company as the corporation's external auditors for the period 2025 to 2026. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,436,825,432 shares, or 99.926% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the appointment of CCP Guares Velay and Company as the corporation's external auditors. 0 shares voted against and 0 shares abstained.
This is noted, and the resolution stands approved. Is there any other business to be taken up in the meeting?
There's no other business to be taken up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to all our stockholders for attending this virtual stockholders meeting. You can rest assured that we will be doing our utmost for you and for Lopez Holdings despite the challenges we face. There being no other business to be taken up, the meeting is hereby adjourned.
We wish to advise the stockholders who attended this meeting that our Investor Relations Office will be emailing those who attended to secure their feedback about the conduct of this virtual meeting. Thank you.